just wanted to say a few words ahead of this video because these videos come off the back of a huge lot of Eaglemoss Star Trek ships that I picked up recently. And so I've put up all the duplicates on eBay for you to have a look at, and I'll include links around and about the place. So if you've got any sort of interest in getting hold of a few of these to have a look at them for yourself, you can do so for a while at least, because it looks like they're not going to go flying off the shelves. I've tried to price them quite reasonably, so do please go and have a look. And without further ado, I will get on with the main video. Cheers. So this is a Malon export vessel. This is in Star Trek Voyager. And my immediate recollection of this one was that it's a freighter and it's filthy and it's also incredibly tough, both in terms of its defense and offense, because Voyager chucked a full complement of a full spread of torpedoes at it, and it just shrugged them off. And part of the reason for that is probably down to the fact that this was designed to haul incredibly toxic waste from its homeworld for dumping in someone else's backyard, effectively. And so as a result, it's got to be strongly shielded because it's very, very radioactive stuff that it's carrying. But that being said, I think it's these elements here that are weapons towers, and it can just sort of spew spatial charges at attacking ships. So I guess a lot of this is about deterrence, because the Malon were in it for the money, basically. So the crews on these very, very toxic vessels were paid very well because it was such a dangerous working environment. And so there was a distinct incentive for them to protect the mission and get the mission done, which meant having a tough ship, and indeed an offensive ship. So I guess the reputation would spread that they weren't to be trifled with, and that might put off other attackers from even thinking about having a go at them. So this one was the first one that appeared. It just has these 3 spherical storage containers for the waste. But they did come back in another episode where the ship was slightly redesigned and pumped up in size, so it had 9 of these spheres and carried them with a sort of more of a central spine running between the 9 that it was carrying. So they were a sort of recurring enemy for Voyager during, I think it was the 5th season. I say enemy, it kind of depends on your point of view as to what they were doing. Sometimes Voyager actually helped them, but other times it was in Voyager's interest to do the opposite. And as you can see, they didn't really sort of gain anything in the looks department by virtue of working with a lot of theta radiation, apparently, whatever that is. And you can see, that's interesting actually, because according to that image there are actually 4 waste canisters, but I think that's incorrect. 7 of 9 closely monitored a Malon export vessel from Astrometrics. After its tanks ruptured and its force reunited. So I think that's from the later episode. That's probably the one with 9. Although I'm still not quite sure how 4 plus 4. I'm not sure about that anyway. Maybe that was a sort of a draft image. I don't know. But so they're not a very scrupulous race. They don't really want to make it obvious what they're doing, but they will nevertheless dump their radioactive waste in areas without being too careful about who's around. And that was the premise of one of the episodes. That this chap here was indigenous to a sort of very, very, very dark expanse of space, and the Malon didn't really care that they were poisoning them to death, basically, because they just thought they found a quiet bit of space to dump their stuff in without being bothered about it, so they just got on with it. But it's got warp and impulse. These are all the weapons towers here, little sort of control room up the front. But on this ship in particular, apparently there was no sort of medical bay or even anything like that to try and help the crew when they did get sick. And it was revealed in a later episode that some of the crew, some of the sort of the core workers, as they were called, who worked near to these storage tanks, some of them actually developed a resistance to the radiation, but they sort of mutated in the process and went mad. And they then caused problems for the other crew members who were trying to sort of keep the vessel in shape and prevent it from exploding. So quite an interesting premise. In fact, there are 4 here. I'm sure I read in the text that it went from 3 to 9, but there's definitely 4 tanks in a row. So that does pan out with the image. But that would be 4, 8, 12 then rather than 9. But anyway, perhaps I misread, I don't know. But anyway, interesting sort of concept. I mean, funnily enough, I covered the ECS Fortunate a couple of videos back now, I think it was, and that was the Earth equivalent. So, but it was a very, very different layout and obviously a very different time as well. But I quite like the spherical nature of this one because it just looks like you would just sort of attach these things in and then you could sort of bounce them back out again when you needed to. So it's quite clever in that sense. And this is just a sort of a general sort of recap of the 5th season, and they were just carried on sort of pushing the envelope in terms of the action. And as I read the other day, at this point, of course, everything had gone CGI, so the ship designs were getting more and more interesting. Got 8472 coming back, got CGI Waterworld. So they were really, really starting to, discover what they could do with CGI at this stage. And of course, it was very much kind of becoming standard by this point in time as well, of course. So it appeared in Star Trek Voyager Night and Star Trek Voyager Juggernaut. So the Juggernaut was the big ship, and that was the one that was going to get blown up if Voyager didn't help them decontaminate it and so on. So yeah, it's not a terribly pretty ship, but it does. Again, it's an example of one of those very, very sort of functional ships where it's designed to do a specific task and it's designed along those lines. But there's commentary from Rick Stern back in there that it was very much what he would consider to be a ship of the week. So it wasn't really intended to come back when he first designed it. And then they told him, by the way, we're going to bring those particular aliens back again for another episode. So then you have to really start fleshing out the design and sort of rethinking it. Now, this is one of those, interesting. Now, that doesn't happen to me very often. I'm glad I wasn't trying to sell that one. That's actually that's not intact. Well. That's very unusual for Eaglemoss. It looks like the glue's just come apart there. Well, that is a live unboxing after all, so there you go. So this top half is actually quite metal, but it looks like it was sort of held on with just sort of glue there, and the glue's given way. It may be in a couple of places actually. That's interesting, because that might mean that it's fixable in the sense that I could actually glue it back together. And in fact, for display purposes, it probably doesn't matter so much, because if it sits on top of a stand, which it might because of the way this one's shaped, it might not matter. But again, this is a classic. Stuff like this drives me nuts with Eaglemoss models, because these little plastic struts are so easy to snap. It happens to me all the time with the Klingon ships and the disruptors. I've lost a couple of disruptors off their Klingon ships because they are so thin and they're plastic. So you do really have to be super careful with ones of that nature. But it's quite a nifty little sort of aft engine design, and the little sort of nose detail there is nice. It's just unfortunate that some decided to come adrift. You can see all the weapons towers are reproduced there as well. So there's a really good attention to detail. Fair dues to them. They've obviously done a nice job with the CG model there. But I wonder how it does sit with the stand, because if that doesn't sit well, that's going to be a bit of an issue. I do actually, funny enough, I do have some glue in the fridge, would you believe, of all places, because I was told that was the best thing to do with it once you'd opened it. If you kept it cold, it would kind of not try and dry out. And touch wood, it has been very, very effective stuff. I have patched up a couple of Eaglemoss models using it over time, but this looks like it's going to require me to put... Now, what is it going to require me to... Well, the only place it can go is directly onto the engines from the looks of it. Is that right? Let me just double check that. Because this is the advantage of having the magazines. You don't always get these with magazines, and indeed I'm guilty of that because I'm selling them just as the models. But the magazines do show you. Oh yeah, look, right onto the engines. So that is exactly where it's supposed to go. So my instinct was in fact correct there, which isn't necessarily ideal. That's actually quite terrifying because that's actually wedged right on top of the engines. But anyway, there it is. So that is your Malon export vessel. It's not a dumpster, honest. It's not even a freighter. It's an export vessel. Because apparently if they didn't export, their entire homeworld would just be toxic. So this is basically what they do to preserve their homeworld. Quite why they're running such a toxic method of energy production in the first place without knowing how to clean it up, I have no idea. But they just burnt antimatter or something that produces antimatter. I don't know. How would that even work? You just end up blowing yourself up, wouldn't you? Anyway, so yeah. So that is the Malon export vessel, which I'm going to have to apply some glue to. Cheers for now.